Zektar gripped his plasma rifle tighter as the boarding pod slammed into the human ship's hull. The metal groaned under the impact and sparks flew from damaged circuits. His 3 hearts beat fast with battle excitement. Today would be another victory for the Vorthic Collective. Against these weak humans, the cutting torch finished its work and the hull plate fell away with a crash. Zektar leaped through the opening first, his 4 arms ready for combat. His team of 12 warriors followed behind him. They moved through the corridors of the human vessel UTS Defiance with practice skill. Something felt wrong, though. The ship was too quiet. There were no alarms, no running feet, no sounds of weapons being prepared. Zektar's antenna twitched with concern. In 3 years of war, human ships always fought back hard when boarded. They reached the main corridor and Zektar held up one hand to stop his team. His enhanced hearing picked up voices ahead, human voices speaking in calm tones. Not the panic he expected. He signaled his warriors to move forward slowly. The bridge doors were open. Zektar could see humans working at their stations. They seemed busy with something important. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the center, looking at a large display screen. His brown hair was messy and his uniform looked like he had been working for days without rest. Lieutenant Amy Walsh sat at the communications station. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls while she spoke into her headset. Dr. Lisa Park stood next to a science console, pointing at data that scrolled across the screen. Commander Ben Carter leaned against the wall, watching the main display. With worried eyes, Zektar burst onto the bridge with his warriors behind him, plasma rifles aimed at the humans. "Surrender now," he growled in broken human speech. "Ship is ours." The humans turned to look at them. Captain Morrison raised his hand slowly. But instead of fear, Zektar saw something else in the humans' eyes. Relief. Double quote. "Thank God you're here," Morrison said. "We need all the help we can get." Zektar's antenna flattened against his skull in confusion. This was not how boarding actions "We're supposed to go. You surrender?" "Look at this," Dr. Park said, pointing at her screen. "Your sensors must have picked it up, too." Against his better judgment, Zektar moved closer to see what she meant. The display showed deep space readings from the edge of the system. There was something there, something big. Something that made no sense. Amy Walsh looked up from her station. "We've been tracking it for 6 hours. It's not natural." "It's not. From any species we know about." Ben Carter pushed himself off the wall. "Our fleets have been fighting each other for 3 years. But this thing out there, it's going to make that war look like a children's game." Zektar stared at the data. The object was massive, easily the size of a small moon. But it was moving in ways that defied physics. It seemed to phase in and out of normal space. The energy readings were impossible. Matter and energy were being converted into something that shouldn't exist. "This is trick," Zektar said, but his voice lacked conviction. The readings matched what his own ship's sensors had detected before the boarding action. Dr. Park shook her head. "I wish it was. We've run every test we can think of. This thing is real and it's heading into our space." Morrison stepped closer to Zektar. The human showed no fear of the armed alien warrior. "My ship was supposed to be studying mineral deposits in this sector. Instead, we found this. We've been trying to understand what it is for the past day." "Why you tell us this?" Zektar asked. "We are enemies." Amy Walsh stood up from her station. "Because our long-range communications are being jammed. We can't warn our fleets. And from what we can tell, this thing doesn't care if we're human or Vorthic. It's going to destroy everything in its path." Zektar felt something he had never experienced before. A human was asking for his help. Not surrender, not mercy, but cooperation. His training told him this was weakness. But the data on the screens told him something different. One of his warriors, Grektal, moved forward with his weapon raised. "Commander, we should take ship now. Humans lie." Ben Carter stepped between the alien warrior and Dr. Park. He had no weapon, but he stood his ground. "She's not lying. Check your own sensors." Zektar activated his wrist communicator and contacted his ship. The response confirmed what the humans were saying. Something was out there in deep space. something that was affecting both human and Vorthak vessels that got too close to it. Two of our scout ships have gone missing, his ship's captain reported. They were investigating energy readings at grid reference 77 Alpha, the same coordinates the humans were tracking. Morrison walked to his captain's chair and sat down heavily. Look, I know we've been fighting. I know your people and mine have lost friends in this war. But that thing out there is going to kill all of us if we don't work together. Zektar looked around the bridge. The humans had gone back to their work, monitoring the approaching object. They were not acting like prisoners. They were acting like people trying to solve a problem. Dr. Park looked up from her console. It's accelerating. Whatever it is, it's moving faster now. Amy Walsh's hands flew over her controls. I'm getting reports from automated beacons. 3 more ships have vanished, 2 human, 1 Vorthak. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of electronics. Zektar realized that in this moment, species didn't matter. The war didn't matter, only survival mattered, what you need from us. He asked Morrison. The human captain smiled for the first time since the boarding. Your ship has better sensors than ours. We need to combine our data. We need to figure out what this thing is and how to stop it. Zektar looked at his warriors. They seemed confused by this turn of events. But they were good soldiers. They would follow his orders. Lower weapons, he commanded. His team obeyed immediately. Ben Carter nodded with respect. There's coffee in the galley if your people drink it. This is going to be a long day. As if summoned by his words, alarms began to sound throughout the ship. Amy Walsh's face went pale as she read her displays. It's changing course, she announced. The object is heading directly for the populated systems. At its current speed, it will reach Colony New Boston in 14 hours. Morrison stood up quickly. Contact both fleets. Tell them to stop fighting and start running? Already trying, sir, Amy replied, but the interference is getting stronger. Zektar realized he was about to do something no Vorthak warrior had ever done before. He was about to fight alongside humans against an enemy that threatened both their species. He just hoped they would all live long enough to figure out what they were really facing. The next few hours changed everything Zektar thought he knew about humans. He watched Captain Morrison work with his crew and realized these beings were nothing like the Vorthak propaganda had claimed. They were not weak. They were not cowards. They were something far more dangerous. They were unpredictable. Dr. Park had connected her computers to the Vorthak ship's sensor array. Data flowed between the 2 vessels as both crews worked together to understand the approaching threat. What they found made Zektar's blood run cold. It's not just one entity, Dr. Park explained, pointing at the combined sensor readings. It's multiple beings fused together into something that shouldn't be able to exist. Amy Walsh looked up from her station where she had been trying to contact the fleets. The interference is getting worse. I think it's coming from the object itself. Ben Carter studied the tactical displays. Our weapons won't work against this thing. Look at these energy read-ins. It's absorbing everything that hits it and converting it into more of itself. Zektar had seen the reports from the missing ships. The few automated distress signals they had received before the vessels vanished showed something terrifying. The entity was breaking down matter at the molecular level and rebuilding it into structures that defied known physics. Morrison paced the bridge like a caged animal. It's terraforming space itself, changing the basic rules of how things work. Not terraforming, Dr. Park corrected. Something else. It's trying to make our reality match wherever it came from. Through the view screen, they could see distant flashes of light as more ships encountered the entity. Each flash represented hundreds of lives lost. Human and Vorthak alike were being consumed by something that existed partially outside normal. Spacetime, Zektar's communicator crackled with reports from his own fleet. Commander, 3 more of our vessels have been lost. The entity is moving toward the main fleet positions. Tell them to retreat, Zektar ordered. Full withdrawal from the sector. His ship's captain sounded confused. Sir, we have the humans. Trapped. This is our chance for victory. No, Zektar said firmly. Victory means nothing if we are all dead. Morrison nodded with approval. My thoughts exactly. Amy, any luck reaching Admiral Thompson? Negative, sir. But I'm picking up fleet movements. Looks like both sides are pulling back. The main display showed the tactical situation. Human and Vorthak fleets were indeed retreating from the approaching entity, but they were moving slowly, still maintaining battle formations against each other, even as a greater threat approached. Idiots, Ben Carter muttered. They're still thinking about the war while that thing is about to eat them all. Dr. Park's console started beeping urgently. It's accelerating again, and the energy output is increasing exponentially. Zektar watched the readings change. The entity was growing larger as it consumed more matter. Each ship it destroyed made it stronger. Each piece of debris it absorbed added to its mass and power. How we stop something like this? He asked. Morrison looked at him with grim determination. I don't know yet, but humans have a saying. When you can't win by the rules, you change the rules. What does that mean? Dr. Park turned from her console. It means we need to think like humans instead of like soldiers. Over the next several hours, Zektar began to understand what she meant. The humans approached the problem from angles Vorthak would consider. Instead of asking how to destroy the entity with superior firepower, they asked questions that seemed insane. What if we fed it something it couldn't digest? Morrison wondered aloud. What if we convinced it to go somewhere else? Amy suggested. What if we made it not want to exist in our reality? Dr. Park added. Ben Carter brought up star charts. The entity is following established shipping lanes. It's going after the highest concentrations of organized matter and energy. Like it's following a food trail, Morrison realized. Zektar found himself drawn into their planning sessions. The humans included him naturally, asking for his opinions and treating him as an equal. It was unlike anything he had experienced in Vorthak military hierarchy. Your people, he said to Morrison during a brief rest period, they think very strange thoughts. Morrison smiled tiredly. Strange is our specialty. The universe is a big, weird place. Sometimes you need big, weird ideas to survive in it. Dr. Park had been working non-stop on the entity's structure analysis. I think I know what it is, she announced. It's from a universe where different physical laws apply. Somehow, it got pulled into our reality. How? Ben Carter asked. Unknown, but look at this. She brought up a complex diagram. It's not trying to destroy us. It's trying to exist. The problem is that for it to exist here, our reality has to change to match its home universe. Amy Walsh nodded slowly, so it's not evil. It's just incompatible with everything we know. Exactly. And the longer it stays here, the more our local space will change to accommodate it. Zektar studied the data. You are saying it will turn our space into something where we cannot live. That's right. And it probably doesn't even realize it's killing us. The bridge fell quiet as everyone absorbed this information. They were facing an entity that could destroy both their civilizations without malicious intent. It was simply trying to survive in an environment that was hostile to its existence. Morrison broke the silence. So how do we send it home? We can't. Dr. Park said, we don't even know where it came from. Then we need to make it not want to stay here, Amy suggested. Ben Carter looked up from his tactical displays. The entity feeds on organized matter and energy. What if we gave it something disorganized? Like what? Chaos, randomness, things that can't be easily converted. Morrison's eyes lit up with understanding. You're talking about quantum uncertainty. Random events at the subatomic level? Dr. Park nodded excitedly. If we could create weapons that fire pure randomness instead of organized energy, Zektar felt lost. This makes no sense. How you fight with randomness? Morrison grinned. Welcome to human military doctrine. When conventional weapons fail, we get unconventional. The next few hours were spent designing theoretical weapons that no sane species would consider building. Devices that would fire quantum uncertainty at targets. Missiles filled with mathematical paradoxes. Minds that would explode into pure chaos at the subatomic level. Will this work? Zektar asked. Probably not, Morrison admitted, but it's better than anything else we've tried. Amy Walsh suddenly straightened at her station. Sir, I'm getting reports from the outer colonies. The entity has reached New Boston system. The main screen showed long-range sensor data. The colony of 50,000 people was simply gone. In its place was something that registered on their instruments as impossible. Matter that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Energy that flowed backward through time. It's working faster now, Dr. Park observed. Each transformation makes the next one easier. Ben Carter checked his weapons inventory. How long do we have before it reaches the core systems? At current speed, maybe 36 hours. Morrison stood up and looked around the bridge. Then, we'd better get started building impossible weapons. Zektar realized he was about to help humans create devices that violated everything he had been taught about physics and warfare. But as he watched the colony disappear from their sensors, he knew they had no choice. Sometimes the impossible was the only option left. The emergency alliance between humans and Vorthak happened faster than anyone thought possible. Within 12 hours, both species had their best scientists working together in ways that would have been unthinkable during peacetime. Zektar found himself assigned as military liaison to the human command structure, a position that gave him a front-row seat to witness how humans planned for the impossible. Admiral Sarah Thompson arrived on the UTS Defiance with a fleet of human vessels. Admiral Krentek brought the Vorthik battle group. For the first time in 3 years, ships from both species shared the same space without shooting at each other. The entity had given them a common enemy that made their war seem small and petty. Dr. Park had been working around the clock with Vorthek scientists to understand the nature of their foe. Her latest findings were disturbing. The entity exists in at least 7 dimensions simultaneously, she explained to the combined command staff. Our weapons only work in 3 dimensions plus time. We're essentially trying to fight something we can only partially see. Admiral Thompson studied the data on her portable screen. What about these quantum uncertainty weapons your team designed? They're theoretical, Dr. Park admitted. We've never built anything like them before. Commander Ben Carter had been working with Vorthik engineers to modify existing weapon systems. The good news is that Vorthik plasma technology can be adapted to create quantum flux. The bad news is we're not sure what will happen when we fire them. Admiral Krentok spoke through his translator device. My engineers report similar concerns. These weapons could destroy our own ships as easily as the target. Zektar watched the Admiral's debate strategy. He was amazed by how quickly the humans adapted to new information. Admiral Thompson changed her battle plans 3 times in 1 hour as new data came in. Vorthek military doctrine emphasized careful planning and rigid execution. Humans seemed to prefer flexible thinking and constant improvisation. Captain Morrison brought up the tactical displays. The entity has consumed 4 more star systems. Each transformation is happening faster than the last. Amy Walsh coordinated communications between the 2 fleets. Both species have begun evacuating the core worlds. But there's nowhere to run if this thing keeps growing. The entity now covered an area larger than most solar systems. It had converted entire planets into structures that defied physics. Space itself was changing around it, creating zones where the normal rules of reality no longer applied. Dr. Park made another breakthrough that changed everything. I think I know why it's accelerating. Each conversion gives it more understanding of our reality. It's learning how to change our universe more efficiently. Like it's getting better at the job, Morrison realized. Exactly. And if my calculations are correct, it will reach a tipping point soon. Once it converts enough local space, the changes will become self-sustaining. Admiral Thompson looked grim. How long do we have? Maybe 8 hours before the cascade effect begins. Zektar felt fear in a way he had never experienced before. Not fear of death in battle, which was honorable, but fear of complete extinction. The entity would not just kill them. It would erase the very possibility of their existence. Ben Carter had been studying human military history. There's precedent for this kind of problem. Sometimes you have to destroy something to save it. What do you mean? Admiral Krentok asked. During Earth's Second World War, there was a battle where Allied forces had to bomb their own positions to stop an enemy advance. Sometimes you have to accept losses to prevent total defeat. Morrison nodded with understanding. You're talking about sacrificing part of our fleet to get close enough to deploy the quantum weapons. The entity absorbs organized matter and energy, Dr. Park explained. But if we create enough chaos around it, we might be able to disrupt its conversion process. Admiral Thompson studied the tactical situation. How many ships would we need to sacrifice? At least half the combined fleet, Ben Carter estimated, maybe more. The bridge fell silent. Both admirals were being asked to send thousands of their people to certain death on the chance that an untested weapon might work against an enemy they barely understood. Zektar spoke for the first time during the meeting. I volunteer to lead the sacrifice mission. Every human on the bridge turned to look at him. Admiral Thompson seemed surprised. You understand what you're volunteering for? Yes, death is certain. Success is not. Morrison stepped forward. If he goes, I go with him. And me, Ben Carter added. Dr. Park nodded. The weapons will need constant adjustment during the attack. I should be there too. Amy Walsh stood up from her station. Someone needs to coordinate communications during the chaos. That's my job. Admiral Thompson looked around the bridge. You're all volunteering for a suicide mission. No, Morrison corrected. We're volunteering for a mission that might not be suicide if we're smart enough and lucky enough. Admiral Krentok spoke through his translator. Zektar, your people will consider this treason. Fighting alongside humans against Vorthak interests. Zektar considered this. The entity does not care about Vorthak interests. It does not care about human interests. It cares only about converting our reality into something else. Fighting it is not treason, it is survival. Over the next several hours, both fleets prepared for the most desperate battle in the history of either species. Quantum uncertainty weapons were installed on volunteer ships. Crews were briefed on tactics that sounded more like science fiction than military strategy. The plan was simple in concept but terrifying in execution. Half the fleet would engage the entity directly, using conventional weapons to get its attention. While it was busy converting those ships, the other half would approach from multiple directions and deploy the quantum weapons at point-blank range. The key is timing, Dr. Park explained to the strike team leaders. We need to create quantum chaos faster than the entity can adapt to it. Ben Carter reviewed the attack patterns. Remember, these aren't normal weapons. They don't follow normal ballistics. The quantum flux will spread in unpredictable patterns. Morrison addressed the combined crews over the communication system. I know this sounds crazy. I know we're asking you to use weapons we've never tested against an enemy we don't understand. But sometimes crazy is the only sane response to the impossible. Zektar found himself thinking about his warrior training. Everything he had been taught emphasized honor, courage, and fighting for the glory of the collective. But standing on this human bridge, preparing to fight alongside former enemies, he realized there was something more important than glory. There was survival. Not just for his people, but for all thinking beings in this region of space. Admiral Thompson gave the final orders. All ships prepare for quantum deployment. Target the entity's core conversion centers. Remember, we only get one chance at this. The two fleets moved toward the entity in carefully coordinated formation. Human and Vorthak ships flew side by side, their weapons powered up and their crews ready for battle. As they approached the edge of the reality distortion field, sensors began showing impossible readings. Time moved in different directions. Matter existed in multiple states simultaneously. Space itself was twisted into shapes that hurt to contemplate. This is it, Morrison announced. We're about to find out if humans and Vorthak can work together well enough to save the universe. Zektar gripped his weapon and prepared for the most important battle of his life. A battle that would be won or lost not by superior firepower, but by the ability to think beyond the normal rules of warfare. The quantum weapons were unlike anything Zektar had ever seen. Instead of firing energy or projectiles, they launched pure mathematical impossibilities into space. Dr. Park had worked with both human and Vorthak engineers to create devices that could generate paradoxes in physical form. Each weapon was essentially a tiny reality storm contained in a metal shell. The strike force consisted of 20 ships, half human and half Vorthak. They approached the entity while the main fleets engaged it from the front. The plan required perfect timing and coordination between species that had been killing each other for 3 years. Captain Morrison piloted the UTS Defiance toward the entity's core structures. Through the viewscreen, Zektar could see formations of matter that shouldn't exist. Crystals that were simultaneously solid and liquid. Geometric shapes that had more angles than three-dimensional space allowed. The entity was converting everything it touched into architecture from its home dimension. Quantum flux generators are online, Amy Walsh reported from her station. All weapons show green status. Ben Carter monitored the tactical displays. First wave is engaging the entity now. It's focusing its attention on the conventional weapons. The entity responded to the fleet attack by extending tentacles of impossible matter. Ships that were touched by these appendages simply ceased to exist in any recognizable form. They became part of the entity's growing structure, their crews. Converted into something that was neither alive nor dead, but something else entirely. Dr. Park watched her instruments with growing excitement. The quantum weapons are having an effect. The entity's conversion rate is slowing in areas where we've deployed uncertainty fields. How much closer do we need to get? Morrison asked. Another 1,000 kilometers. We need to deploy the weapons directly into its core processing centers. Zektar studied the approaching entity through his helmet's enhanced optics. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. Structures that defied geometry shifted and flowed like living architecture. But he could also see the remains of consumed worlds embedded in its surface. Planets and moons had been converted into building materials for something that existed across multiple dimensions. Contact in 30 seconds, Ben Carter announced. All ships report ready for deployment. The strike force split into 4 groups and approached the entity from different angles. The plan was to surround its core and deploy all quantum weapons simultaneously. If they succeeded, the paradox fields would create enough chaos to disrupt the entity's ability to convert matter. Remember, Dr. Park broadcast to all ships, these weapons affect reality itself. Stay away from the deployment zones or you'll be caught in the paradox fields. Morrison guided their ship toward a structure that looked like a cathedral made of crystallized time. That's our target, the entity's main conversion processor. Zektar activated his combat systems and prepared for the deployment. He had fought in dozens of battles, but this was different. They weren't fighting another army. They were fighting the very concept of ordered existence. Deploy in 5 seconds, Amy Walsh counted down. 4, 3, 2, 1, deploy. 20 quantum uncertainty weapons launched toward the entity's core structures. Instead of explosions, they created areas where reality became fluid. Mathematics broke down. Cause and effect stopped working normally. The entity's perfect geometric forms began to waver and shift. It's working, Dr. Park shouted over the alarms. The conversion rate is dropping rapidly, but the entity was adapting. It began to pull its core structures away from the paradox fields. Tentacles of impossible matter reached toward the attacking ships with increased speed and aggression. It knows we're a threat now, Morrison realized. All ships evasive maneuvers. The UTS Defiance twisted through space, dodging attacks from an enemy that could bend the laws of physics. Ben Carter fired conventional weapons to keep the entity's attention while Dr. Park prepared a second wave of quantum weapons. 3 Vorthak ships were caught by the entity's tentacles. Zektar watched in horror as vessels he had served with for years were converted into alien architecture. The crews didn't die. They became something else, their matter and energy reorganized according to rules from another dimension. "Second wave ready," Dr. Park announced. "But we need to get closer to the core structures." Morrison looked at Zektar. "Your ship has better armor than ours. Can you get us through those tentacles?" Zektar activated his communicator and spoke to his remaining warriors on nearby ships. "All Vorthek vessels form protective formation. Around human ships, we clear path to target. The remaining Vorthak ships move to shield the human vessels as they approach the entity's core. Plasma fire from Vorthak weapons couldn't destroy the entity's tentacles, but it could distract them. Long enough for the human ships to deploy their quantum weapons. "Deploying second wave now," Amy Walsh announced. More paradox fields bloomed around the entity's core structures. This time the effect was dramatic. Large sections of the entity began to lose cohesion. Its perfect geometry started to break down. As mathematical impossibilities infected its conversion processes, but the entity fought back. It began to pulse with energy that affected space itself. Ships caught in these pulses experienced temporal distortions. Some aged years and seconds. Others moved backward through time. "The entity is destabilizing local space-time," Dr. Park warned. "If this continues, it could create a cascade effect that damages the entire star system." Ben Carter checked his tactical displays. "Half our ships are gone or disabled. We need to finish this quickly." Morrison made a decision that only humans would consider. "All remaining ships ram attack on the core structure. Deploy quantum weapons at point-blank range." "Sir, that's suicide," Amy Walsh protested. "No, that's victory. The entity can't convert matter that's in a state of quantum uncertainty. If we can create enough chaos at its core, it will lose the ability to maintain coherence in our reality." Zektar understood what Morrison was proposing. They would sacrifice themselves to ensure the quantum weapons detonated inside the entity's most critical systems. It was a tactic no Vorthak commander would consider because it offered no chance of survival for the attacking force. "I will lead the Ram attack," Zektar announced. "My ship has strongest armor." Morrison shook his head. "We do this together." All remaining ships synchronized approach to the core structure. The final assault began with 6 ships diving directly into the entity's core processing centers. They fired quantum weapons continuously as they approached, creating a wave of uncertainty that preceded their physical attack. The entity's tentacles reached for them, but the paradox fields made it difficult for the alien structure to maintain coherence. Its attacks became erratic and unfocused. "Impact in 10 seconds, Ben Carter announced. "All hands, brace for quantum detonation." Dr. Park activated the final quantum weapon as their ship struck the entity's core structure. The explosion wasn't visible in normal space. Instead, reality itself became uncertain around the impact point. Zektar felt his existence become fluid. For a moment that lasted forever, he was simultaneously alive and dead, human and Vorthak, matter and energy. The quantum uncertainty spread through his consciousness and showed him possibilities that existed in parallel dimensions. Then reality snapped back into focus. The entity's core structure was collapsing. Without its central processing centers, it could no longer maintain its grip on local spacetime. The converted matter began to revert to normal physics. "It's working!" Dr. Park gasped. "The entity is losing coherence throughout the affected region." Morrison struggled to his feet as the ship's artificial gravity fluctuated. "Can we contain the collapse?" "I think so. The quantum uncertainty is creating a barrier that the entity can't cross. It's being forced back toward its point of origin." Through the damaged view screen, they watched as the entity's vast structure began to unravel. Converted planets returned to their normal state. Space itself stopped being twisted into impossible geometries, but the entity wasn't being destroyed. It was being sent somewhere else. Somewhere that matched its home dimension's physics. "We didn't kill it," Amy Walsh realized. "We sent it home." Zektar looked around the damaged bridge and realized something fundamental had changed. He had just fought alongside humans in a battle that saved both their species. The war between Vorthak and humans suddenly seemed pointless and wasteful. "Morrison," he said, "your people. They think in ways that should not work, but they do work." Morrison smiled despite his injuries. "Welcome to humanity. We specialize in making the impossible seem routine." As rescue ships from both fleets approached their position, Zektar realized he was no longer the same warrior who had boarded this ship days ago. He had learned something about humans that would change everything between their species. They were not weak. They were the most dangerous beings in the galaxy because they refused to accept that anything was truly impossible. The dimensional breach took 3 days to fully stabilize. Zektar spent those days working alongside human engineers to contain the quantum effects that still rippled through local space. Dr. Park had been right about the cascade potential. If they hadn't acted quickly, the reality distortions could have spread to neighboring star systems. Admiral Thompson and Admiral Krentak worked together to coordinate the cleanup operation. Ships from both fleets searched for survivors and worked to repair the damage caused by the entity's presence. What they found changed both species' understanding of the universe. The entity didn't just convert matter, Dr. Park explained during a joint briefing. It left behind traces of its home dimension's physics. "We're finding pockets of space where our normal laws don't apply." Captain Morrison studied the sensor readings from the affected areas. "Are they dangerous?" "Not immediately, but they're stable. These zones might be permanent reminders of what happened here." Zektar had been assigned to help catalog these anomalous regions. Working with human scientists had taught him to think about problems in new ways. Where Vorthak training emphasized force and direct action, humans seemed to prefer understanding and adaptation. Amy Walsh coordinated communications between the research teams. "We found 17 stable anomaly zones so far. Each one shows different alterations to local physics." Ben Carter had been studying the tactical implications. "Some of these zones could be useful. Faster-than-light travel works differently in 3 of them. We might be able to develop new propulsion systems." The cooperation between human and Vorthak crews had continued even after the immediate crisis passed. Engineers shared technical knowledge, scientists collaborated on research projects. Military officers developed joint training protocols. "Your people adapt very quickly," Zektar observed to Morrison as they watched mixed crews working together on the bridge. Morrison nodded. "Humans have always been good at making friends with former enemies. It's one of our better survival traits. My people will find this more difficult." Vorthak military tradition emphasizes honor and hierarchy. "Working as equals with other species is not natural for us, but you're doing it now." Zektar considered. Yes, because I have seen what humans can accomplish when they refuse to accept limitations." The final reports from the cleanup operation were sobering but hopeful. The entity had consumed 4 star systems completely before being sent back to its home dimension. Millions of lives had been lost, but the quantum weapons had worked. The impossible had been made possible through human ingenuity and cross-species cooperation. Dr. Park presented her analysis to the combined command staff. "We've learned enough about dimensional physics to build early warning systems. If anything like this happens again, we'll have advance notice." Admiral Thompson looked pleased. "And the quantum uncertainty weapons? They work better than we hoped, but they're dangerous to use. Each deployment risks creating permanent alterations to local spacetime." Admiral Krentak spoke through his translator. "These weapons must be controlled carefully. Both species must agree on their use." Morrison suggested something that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. "We should establish joint research stations to study these new physics. Human creativity combined with Vorthak engineering could lead to breakthroughs neither species could achieve alone." Zektar found himself nodding in agreement. "The entity showed us that there are threats in the universe that don't care about our territorial disputes. We need to be prepared to face them together." Over the following months, the relationship between humans and Vorthak evolved rapidly. The war officially ended with a treaty that established shared colonies in the former contested territories. Joint research facilities were built to study the quantum anomalies left behind by the entity. Zektar accepted a position as Director of Cross-Species Military Cooperation. His job was to develop training programs that would prepare mixed human Vorthak units for future crisis situations. It was work that would have been considered treason before the entity's arrival. "Do you think it will come back?" Amy Walsh asked during one of their planning sessions. Dr. Park looked up from her research notes. "Probably not. We sent it to a dimension that matches its physics. It has no reason to return here." But there might be others," Ben Carter pointed out. "The universe is big and full of things we don't understand yet." Morrison leaned back in his chair. "Then we'll face them the same way we faced this one. Together with creativity and by refusing to accept that any problem is truly unsolvable." Zektar had come to appreciate the human philosophy of adaptive problem-solving, where Vorthak culture emphasized perfecting known techniques. Humans seemed to prefer inventing new approaches for each challenge they faced. "Your species is dangerous," he told Morrison one day as they watched human and Vorthak children playing together in one of the new joint colonies. Morrison looked concerned. "Dangerous how?" "You make other species believe that impossible things are merely improbable. You convince them to attempt solutions that should not work but somehow do work," Morrison smiled. "Is that such a bad thing?" Zektar watched a human child teaching a young Vorthak how to play a game that involved predicting quantum probability outcomes. "No, I think it is exactly what the universe needs." The quantum anomalies left behind by the entity became sites of scientific research that advanced both species' understanding of physics. New technologies emerged from studying the altered space-time regions, faster-than-light communication systems, energy sources that drew power from dimensional fluctuations, defensive shields based on controlled uncertainty fields. Dr. Park published papers on dimensional physics that revolutionized scientific thinking across multiple species. Her work attracted researchers from civilizations that had previously avoided contact with humans or Vorthak. "We're becoming known as the species that fought something impossible and won," she told Zektar during a research conference. "Other civilizations want to understand how we did it." "What do you tell them?" "That we succeeded because we combined human refusal to accept limitations with Vorthak willingness to take decisive action. Neither species could have done it alone." Zektar thought about this as he prepared his own presentation on interspecies military cooperation. The entity had forced both humans and Vorthak to evolve beyond their previous limitations. They had become something new, something capable of facing threats that individual species couldn't handle. Years later, when other dimensional entities appeared in distant parts of the galaxy, human Vorthak response teams were among the first to be called for assistance. Their quantum uncertainty weapons and cooperative tactics became the standard for dealing with extra-dimensional threats. Zektar eventually retired from active military service and became an instructor at the Joint Academy where human and Vorthak officers trained together. His favorite lesson involved showing new students recordings from the entity encounter. "This is what happens when species stop fighting each other and start fighting for each other," he would tell each new class. "The humans taught us that impossible is just another word for a problem we haven't solved yet." On quiet evenings, Zektar would sometimes look up at the stars and remember the day he first stood with humans against something that wasn't supposed to exist. He had learned that humans were not weak or cowardly. They were something far more remarkable. They were beings who could look at the impossible and see an opportunity to prove that reality was more flexible than anyone had imagined. They had taught him that the most dangerous enemies were those who attacked the very concept of possibility itself, but they had also taught him that with cooperation, creativity, and a willingness to think beyond conventional limitations, even the impossible could be overcome. The entity had shown both species that the universe contained threats that transcended normal understanding. But working together, humans and Vorthak had proven that intelligence and determination could triumph over even the most fundamental violations of reality. And if other impossible things appeared in the future, they would be ready to face them. With the most powerful weapon in the universe, the human ability to turn impossibility into inevitability through pure, stubborn refusal to give up,